Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to be back in Washington, D.C., working alongside our American partners on ways to better support the middle class. And it's great to be joined by our Canadian delegation, including Minister Freeland and Parliamentary Secretary Leslie, who are, as usual, hard at work. I've had a very productive time here, beginning with Fortune's Most Powerful Women Summit. There, I had an excellent conversation with Patty Sellers about the economic empowerment of women. Before and during that event, I met with some incredibly influential women business leaders to discuss some of our most pressing challenges and had an opportunity to talk with amazing, inspiring young high school students who are focused on how they can be leaders of tomorrow and leaders today. We know that the success of any society depends on the full socioeconomic participation of women, because women succeed, we all succeed. And whether it's flexible hours, parental leave, affordable childcare, diversity training, equal pay, or any other number of initiatives, it's incumbent on all of us across the public and private spheres to be proud agents for change. Following that theme, this morning I had a productive roundtable with Women One, where we discussed the current barriers to global gender equality and marked the International Day of the Girl. I also met with the Committee on Ways and Means, and we had a great conversation about the importance of the Canada-US partnership. And I just wrapped up a very good meeting with President Trump, where we talked about trade, security, and economic growth. As we know, the fourth round of NAFTA negotiations is underway here in Washington, and the President and I reiterated our commitment to working together in good faith to give this deal a much-needed upgrade. NAFTA has benefited millions of people and can benefit millions more. We're pleased to have the opportunity to modernize this trade agreement for the current economy, a modernization that acknowledges the importance of gender, the environment, and Indigenous and labor rights. We know that there are millions of jobs on both sides of the Canada-US border that rely on trade and investment. In fact, Canada is among the top export markets for the majority of U.S. states. And so it's imperative that we get a fair deal for Canadians, Americans, and Mexicans alike. That's what our teams at all orders of government are working hard towards. De façon générale, notre voyage à Washington s'est avéré très productif. Lors de chacune de mes rencontres, la question que j'avais en tête était toujours la même, c'est-à-dire comment pouvons-nous travailler ensemble, Américains et Canadiens, pour mieux servir la classe moyenne et ceux qui travaillent fort pour en faire partie? Parce qu'en bout de ligne, nous voulons faire ce qu'il y a de mieux pour nos citoyens. Et nous savons que nous obtiendrons de meilleurs résultats en travaillant ensemble. C'est ce qui nous définit en tant que Canadiens et Américains. C'est ce qui fait de nous des amis proches et des alliés résolus. Indeed, I've said it before and I'll say it again. There is no relationship in the entire world quite like that between Canada and the United States. We can and we will continue to achieve great things together. Thank you again for being here. I'm happy to take your questions now.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Madeleine Blais-Morin de Radio-Canada. Si vous pouvez répondre en français et en anglais, s'il vous plaît. Qu'est-ce que Donald Trump vous a dit au sujet de l'ALENA et est-ce que c'est maintenant plus clair pour vous ce qu'il veut?
C'est clair que ce que le président veut, c'est ce que je veux. D'assurer des bons emplois pour nos citoyens, d'assurer une prospérité pour nos communautés dans les années à venir et de comprendre qu'il y a des façons que nous pouvons travailler ensemble pour améliorer, pour moderniser l'accord de l'ALENA de façon à permettre à nos citoyens de mieux réussir dans cette économie mondiale. The President and I agree that the goal of the NAFTA negotiations, the goal of any trade negotiations, needs to give opportunities to our citizens to succeed in an increasingly globalized world, to benefit from the opportunities that trade can give in a fair way. And that's the President's focus, and it's certainly my focus.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Joyce Napier, CTV. You went to see the Ways and Means Committee in Congress, an important and strategic one for trade. Are they your allies? Did you feel that you had allies there and strong ones?
I think one of the things that I've seen in all my conversations with different members of the American establishment, administration, local governments, is that there is a deep understanding of the ways in which citizens across the United States benefit from trade with Canada. As I mentioned this morning, and is always important to underline, the U.S. has no bigger customer than Canada. Every year, the U.S. ships more goods to Canada than it does to China, Japan, and the UK combined. So good relations with Canada, a positive trade relationship, is something that directly benefits citizens right across the United States and in many, many of the constituencies directly represented by members of the Ways and Means Committee. They understand how important getting trade right is for their communities, for their citizens, for businesses right across the United States, and they were very open to the conversation we were having.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
La conversation que nous avons eue ce matin avec le comité des Ways and Means du Congrès a mis l'emphase sur le fait que ce que j'ai entendu à travers les États-Unis en parlant avec des gouverneurs, avec différents membres de l'administration, c'est qu'il y a des bénéfices concrets pour leur communauté, pour leurs citoyens, des échanges commerciaux avec le Canada. En fait, les États-Unis vendent plus à chaque année au Canada qu'ils vendent en Chine, au Japon et au Royaume-Uni ensemble. On est leur plus grand client. Donc, on sait très bien que c'est un impact direct sur beaucoup des commettants de ces membres du comité et ils sont très ouverts à la conversation que nous avons eue ce matin.
Going back to the clarity, in the 6 minutes that we were in the Oval Office, the President hinted he could do away with NAFTA, but then again, not. He said it could be a two-way, a three-way, or no way. What did you understand from what he said?
What I continue to understand is that moving forward in a way that directly benefits citizens in our three countries is really important. As we engage in these negotiations in a serious and thoughtful way, we're continually looking for ways to improve the economic opportunities for our citizens, knowing that proper trade agreements like a renegotiated NAFTA will ensure better outcomes for citizens in all three countries. We remain focused in a serious way on the NAFTA negotiations and we'll continue to demonstrate that we understand that it is very important and very possible to get a win-win-win, as Vice President Pence said a number of months ago, out of these negotiations. So saying, I think it's been clear that circumstances are often challenging and we have to be ready for anything, and we are. We're taking this very seriously. We're taking the importance of standing up for Canadian jobs and Canadian economic growth extremely seriously, and that goes through every engagement we have with the Americans.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Evan Dyer, CBC News. The Mexican two ministers in charge of this file have been talking in the last couple of days, sending a message that Mexico is bigger than NAFTA, that Mexico is ready to walk away from these talks. And not only these talks, but that if the U.S. Rescinds NAFTA, Mexico might end cooperation in other areas like migration, counter-narcotics, and so on. You've chosen a less confrontational approach, more honey, less vinegar, I guess. Why is that? And do you think maybe it's time to take a page from the Mexican book and try the other approach?
I think what we have seen throughout is a recognition by this president and indeed by the American administration that the relationship with Canada is a very strong and positive one. They have a $35 billion U.S. manufacturing surplus with Canada. We have a very even trade relationship. We have very similar values and standards and approach to trade. And I am very confident that the impact that trade with Canada has had on the United States has been overwhelmingly positive over the entirety of our relationship, but particularly over the past 25 years of NAFTA. So we continue to know that this administration's focus is on helping American jobs, on helping the American middle class, and we know that trade with Canada is a very important lever in creating those opportunities for Americans and Canadians alike.
So, given that as you just pointed out, the Canadian relationship with the U.S. is different than Mexico's, the President today talked about the possibility of bilateral arrangements. Could you see a point where Canada decides it's better to go it alone without Mexico and try to establish a bilateral deal with the United States?
I continue to believe in NAFTA. I continue to believe that as a continent working together in complementary ways is better for our citizens, is better for economic growth, and allows us to compete on stronger footing with the global economy. So saying, we are ready for anything, and we will continue to work diligently to protect Canadian interests, to stand up for jobs and look for opportunities for Canadian businesses and citizens of all of our friends and neighbor countries to do well. C'est certain que je continue à croire que l'ALENA reste la meilleure façon pour nos trois pays de faire face à la compétition dans l'économie mondiale, que c'est une façon concrète d'aider nos citoyens et de créer de la croissance économique. Et nous allons continuer de travailler de façon sérieuse et diligente sur les négociations de l'ALENA. Mais en même temps, je pense que nous reconnaissons tous que l'imprévu est toujours possible et nous devons être prêts pour tout et nous sommes prêts pour tout. Nous allons toujours, quelle que soit la situation, pouvoir défendre les emplois, les intérêts canadiens, tout en s'assurant qu'on crée de la croissance économique chez nos voisins et nos partenaires aussi.
Hi, Daniel Dale from the Toronto Star. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, I'm sure you saw, has been warning of poison pills it believes the Trump administration has been inserting into its proposals. And perhaps the most significant one is about automotive rules of origin. Have you seen the specific U.S. proposal on rules of origin yet? And is there any red line for you on rules of origin? For example, a 50% U.S. content requirement?
There are ongoing negotiations happening as we speak right now, and we will continue to look at whatever proposals come forward from any partners. But it's clear that on the automotive industry, for example, the level of integration specifically between Canada and the United States is extremely successful and, quite frankly, extremely beneficial. It makes sense for a Magna part to start in Strathroy, Ontario, be shipped to Michigan, then shipped to Ohio, then shipped for assembly, back and forth across the border, because we have an extremely successful auto manufacturing industry that crosses the border multiple times. This has been a tremendous benefit for workers on both sides of the border, and we will continue to demonstrate that a highly integrated auto sector is better able to compete on the world stage against auto manufacturers from outside of North America than would be segmentation and shutting down the extremely successful auto approach that we've demonstrated over many years.
Is there anything you've heard so far on autos, on a sunset clause, on one-for-one government procurement exchange, to which you'd say, absolutely not, Canada won't do that?
I think our approach has been to work seriously and take seriously the proposals put forward. Obviously, there are proposals that we disagree with, but these are negotiations, and we stay in good faith on them, putting forward things that we think will benefit not just Canadian workers, but the entire North American economy. That's something we're going to stay with, and we will continue to work diligently towards getting a deal.
Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister. Katie Simpson, CBC News. I'd like to read a quote to you, something that Donald Trump said this afternoon. He said, "We're going to be discussing defense because we have these are truly great and mutual allies, and mutual defense is very important. And we'll also discuss mutual offense, which people don't mention too often, but offense is part of defense." What was Donald Trump talking about when he said that?
Canada is proud that our soldiers have been active and present in very challenging places all around the world. The level of collaboration, coordination with our NATO partners, and specifically with the United States in places like northern Iraq, around Mosul, in places like Afghanistan historically, has always been very effective. We will continue to work together on a broad range of security issues because that's what our citizens expect, and quite frankly, those are the kinds of contributions that Canadians and the world expects of Canada and the United States.
My follow-up question is there something specific he's mentioning there as well? Did you address the Boeing Bombardier spat, and did you give notice to the American government, to Trump, that the Canadian government is no longer interested in doing any business with Boeing when it comes to the Super Hornet jets?
We did address that directly. I highlighted to the President how we disagree vehemently with Commerce's decision to bring in countervailing and anti-dumping duties against Bombardier, that we feel that this is not something that is warranted, and quite frankly something that we look very negatively upon. The attempts by Boeing to put tens of thousands of aerospace workers out of work across Canada is not something we look on positively, and I certainly mentioned that this was a block to us purchasing making any military procurements from Boeing.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
J'ai souligné directement au président, et c'est une des bonnes choses des relations que nous avons avec l'administration américaine et ce président en particulier, qu'on peut être très direct et très franc dans nos conversations, et j'ai souligné que c'était inacceptable ce que le département du commerce et ce que Boeing ont décidé par rapport à Bombardier, et que c'était inconcevable qu'on fasse des achats militaires de Boeing si Boeing continue d'agir de cette façon. Ça n'a pas été une conversation facile, mais c'est une conversation importante à avoir, et les bonnes relations que j'ai avec le président nous permettent de dire les vraies affaires de façon très directe.
Campbell Clark from the
Il comprenait que c'était un enjeu très important pour nous.
Campbell Clark from the Globe and Mail. Prime Minister, you've been optimistic about a renegotiation of NAFTA, but you heard the President say today he might terminate it. As Prime Minister, at what point do you have to start preparing Canadians for the possibility that the North American Free Trade Agreement could fall apart? And how close are you to that point?
My optimism towards NAFTA, towards a renegotiation, isn't based on personality or reading political tea leaves. My optimism is based on the fact that I know how good NAFTA has been for millions of citizens of Canada, of the United States, and indeed for New Mexico. I know that there are opportunities to significantly improve this trade deal in ways that will benefit citizens right across the United States and Canada as well. And I truly believe that we can work together in a meaningful way to bring those benefits to our citizens. I understand that these negotiations are difficult, and they will continue to be difficult and unpredictable at times. But I truly believe that the President is focused on creating benefits for his citizens, for the middle class, the way we are, and that positive trade deals, modernized trade deals, are a very powerful lever for getting that done. So that is something that I continue to focus on. The conversations we've had with the Ways and Means Committee, the conversations I've had with governors across the country, the conversations I've had with various leaders of industry have all emphasized that they see the direct benefits that NAFTA has brought to their communities, to their economies, and can continue to bring in the future. So we walk forward in a serious way, confident that we're going to be able to continue to defend Canadian opportunities and jobs while creating opportunities for Americans and Mexican citizens.
But should you be preparing Canadians for the prospect that Mr. Trump will terminate NAFTA?
I think Canadians are aware that the American administration and the President makes decisions that surprise people from time to time. And that is certainly something that we are very much aware of and very braced for and conscious of. But at the same time, Canadians expect us to work in a thoughtful, meaningful way towards getting a good deal that means a good deal for Canada, but also a good deal for the United States. And our negotiators and our partners are working very, very hard on meaningful improvements to this deal that will indeed not just benefit our citizens in our countries, but position North America to better be able to compete with countries and economies around the world. Je continue d'être optimiste par rapport à cette situation parce que nous savons que les bénéfices du commerce entre le Canada et les Américains ont été sentis par des millions de citoyens dans nos deux pays. On n'a pas d'illusion que ce président, et les Canadiens savent très bien que ce président peut surprendre de temps en temps, mais en même temps, je sais que cette administration est extrêmement axée sur le fait de créer des emplois et des opportunités pour leurs citoyens, des emplois et des opportunités qui viennent par des accords commerciaux modernisés. Alors, nous allons continuer de travailler de façon sérieuse pour défendre nos intérêts et pour savoir que c'est très possible d'avoir un accord qui donnera des avantages et au Canada et aux États-Unis et au Mexique en même temps. Et c'est sur ça que nous travaillons de façon si concentrée.
Stephanie Levitz, the Canadian Press. You said several times that you're ready for anything. What is the anything that you're ready for? Is there a plan B, and what does it look like?
As I said, we're very much focused on continuing to negotiate in good faith on modernizing and upgrading NAFTA. This is something that we know has given tremendous benefits to communities, to workers in our two countries, and will continue to in the future. There are opportunities to improve it and upgrade it, modernize it, and we're excited about that. At the same time, we know that there is a certain level of unpredictability these days, over these past months, that we need to be conscious of, and we are always looking for ways to ensure that regardless of what happens, we will be able to defend Canadian jobs, stand up for Canada's interests, and grow our economy in meaningful ways that benefit all Canadians.
Do you see a point coming where the interests of Canadians will be better served not by pursuing trilateral trade negotiations, but bilateral negotiations with the United States unilaterally, Mexico unilaterally, or one or the other?
NAFTA has been in place for 25 years, and I think it's certainly worthwhile to focus on improving it, to modernizing it, to addressing challenges that may have arisen within it. And we're certainly going to be focused on doing that to shorten the period of uncertainty around any negotiations that happen, so that the business community, so investors, so people can have confidence in their future and their jobs. But as I've always said, we are very aware that there are other potential paths out there, and we will address them when as they arise, with the knowledge that they are certainly out there.
We'll take two last questions.
Brett Fortnum with Inside U.S. Trade. Do you think that threats to withdraw from NAFTA are...
Sorry, can you speak a little closer to the mic?
Sure. Do you think that threats to withdraw from NAFTA are helpful? And if the U.S. does decide to withdraw, is falling back on the U.S.-Canada Free Trade Agreement a good enough option for Canada, and would that agreement have to be updated as well?
Well, the Canada-U.S. agreement is well over 25 years old, close to 30 years old. So certainly it is not as modern and advanced a treaty as even NAFTA is. We would much rather continue to modernize and update NAFTA. I think there are many different approaches on negotiations, and we are continuing to work seriously and diligently, putting meaningful proposals forward and looking for ways to improve the outcomes, not just for Canada's citizens, but for citizens of our friend and partner countries. That's the focus we're going to continue to have, and it's one that Canadians support.
And to follow up, you've mentioned several times a progressive trade agenda that includes gender and indigenous chapters. Can you outline for us a little bit more what those chapters would entail, what obligations they would put on the U.S.?
I think one of the challenges we see around trade deals these days is that citizens aren't always aware or convinced of the benefits that flow to them from these deals. There's a perception that large corporations, multinationals, perhaps governments benefit from trade deals, but individual citizens, individual workers, small businesses don't always benefit from large international trade deals. And I think it has become imperative as we move forward on trade deals to demonstrate that we understand citizens' anxieties and worries, and that we are actively looking for ways to ensure protections and opportunities for minorities, for marginalized communities, for women, within the framework of these trade deals. Part of getting these trade deals to move forward requires us to get support, public support for these trade deals, and demonstrating that we're hearing the concerns that people feel and responding to them, I think helps significantly in making the case that trade can and will be good for all citizens.
Last question, then question.
Paul Vieira, Wall Street Journal. Mr. Trudeau, do you believe, or Mr. Prime Minister, do you believe that these talks can conclude successfully by year end, as both Mexico and the U.S. want?
There's no question that the compressed timeline for the renegotiating of NAFTA has always been seen as a challenge, but I don't think an insurmountable one. I think there are so many ways in which our countries can agree on benefits for our citizens and opportunities to grow the economy that we can certainly make significant improvements to NAFTA within the timeline given. We just have to make sure that our negotiators are continuing to roll up their sleeves and work seriously and in good faith. That's certainly what the Canadians are doing, and we are certainly going to continue to work to try and meet all the deadlines and the timelines put forward. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.